Come on, there's a few more seats over here, and then if not, you can go start going upstairs. Okay, let's start. Before we begin, let's do the handles. If you are going to be tweeting or Facebooking the event, we have a couple of handles you can use. Please use, there's no Wi-Fi, so never mind. If you can connect, at least do Black Lives Matter Beloit, hashtag Black Lives Matter Beloit, or hashtag Black Lives Matter, because both are searched, and BLMB panel 2. So if you do end up getting a Wi-Fi for a minute, or you have data that works, please do so. You can come on in, there's room upstairs as well if there's no room down here. All right, good evening, everybody. Come on, good evening, everybody. There we go, call and response, call and response. All right, this is our second panel of our Black Lives Matter Beloit series on institutional racism and the black body. Tonight, we are going to have a frank conversation about a topic that many in society like to run away from, and that's racism. In particular, we are going to focus on the ways in which racism is embedded within every institution in the U.S. and how the black body is seen as an inherent threat within these structures. So basically, things are going to get real. The panel will make us confront the work we need to do as members of a society through openly acknowledging in and talking about the ways race and racism are real and operate both in the Beloit City and on campus, especially in light of recent racist events and incidents that have happened over the past month. And we'll get into that in the panel as well today. We're going to confront the prevalence of anti-black racism in particular, a topic that seems to elicit strong reactions and opinions. And we'll follow the same format as the first panel on hashtag activism, in which we're going to have a dialogue with the audience. It's not going to be the panelists just talking at you, we're going to have the audience interacting with us. And so my name is Dr. Nicole Truesdell. I direct the McNair Scholars Program here at Beloit College, and I'm also an adjunct in the anthropology department. And I'll be a moderator for tonight. I'll keep my opinions mostly to myself, and let the panelists lead us in these discussions. So let's introduce the panel. Immediately to my left is Mr. Mark Smith. He's a grassroots activist and speaker whose work lays bare the structural racialization of the U.S. criminal justice system and encourages the personal and spiritual acts of liberation needed to transform that system. A Beloit resident since 2002, he currently studies business management at Black Hawk Technical College. And Mr. Smith is a Muslim and has dedicated his life to the work of abolishing structural racialization. Ms. Devin McCrae is a fourth-year student from Brooklyn, New York, studying sociology and journalism. She's a member of Black Students United, the Kappa Delta sorority, and a section editor on the Beloit College Roundtable. Devin is particularly interested in the intersections of race and gender and plans to pursue a career in consumer insight and marketing after graduation. We now have Professor Courtney Patterson, who is the inaugural teaching fellow in the critical identity studies at Beloit College. A doctoral candidate in the Department of African American Studies at Northwestern University. She holds a bachelor's degree in Afro-American Studies from the University of Pennsylvania and a master's degree in African American Studies from Northwestern. Her dissertation, Fat Chance, Slim Chance, Identity, Culture, and the Politic of Fatness, studies fat black women and the political construction of body size through the lens of popular culture, fashion, and sexuality to understand how their sociocultural experiences may frame, define, and regulate their identity. Her research interests include black women's sociopolitical histories and realities, fat studies, race, class, and gender, sexuality, cultural and medical sociology, and HIV/AIDS. Her most recent work is Just Baby Fat, Black Female Teenagers' Body Size and Sexuality, and Contemporary Black Feminist Sexualities, was published in January 2015. And last, we have Dr. Lois Quinn, who co-authored the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee study on Wisconsin's mass incarceration of African-American males. She's employed as a senior scientist with the UWM Employment and Training Institute, and her recent work addresses prison and driver's license barriers to employment and identifying assets and challenges for families in Central City, Milwaukee neighborhoods. Quinn has a master's degree and PhD in urban studies from UWM. So let's get into it. Show of hands from the audience. How many of you actually believe in this idea called institutional racism? Okay, that's good. How many of you do not? And don't be afraid to put your hands up from that. How many of you don't really know? actually. All right, so from the audience, can someone tell me what they understand institutional racism to be? How would you all understand or define it to somebody else? Don't be shy.
I know some students who I can call on.
Yes. Go ahead, right there. Mungo.
I'm Megan. I'm an anthropology student, third year here, and my understanding of institutional racism is that it's the idea that the way society and the institutions within it are structured perpetuates the cultural concepts of race and the ways we stereotype races, and basically makes racism so much a part of our daily lives that we don't always notice when we're being racist or saying things or doing things that discriminate against people based on their skin color or their ethnic identity and cultural identity. And so it's that idea that it's so ingrained in the institutions of our society that even if we actively try to be not racist and are actively accepting of others, the things that we do and say often still perpetuate racism.
Okay. Anyone else want to take a stab at it? Right up in front, Manumunga. Right here.
I would say it's also the policies and practices of institutions that are designed to keep other people out and work in favor of whites in our society, or white privilege is a big part of institutional racism as well.
Okay, so we're talking about both the personal structures ingrained, but also the policies in place that perpetuate those things. One more.
I'm Brian. I think it's also the residual structures of racism that existed from the time of slavery.
Oh, okay. Okay, so let's bring it back to the panelists to kind of kick this off then. So for our panelists, how do you understand and explain institutional racism to others? But then also, how do you explain it differently to those, or do you explain it differently to those who do not believe that racism actually exists or is still prevalent in today's society?
I feel like what people said is pretty accurate in a sense, but one thing I say that I would say to people who actually know is that it's always a dynamic, changing, ever-changing face of what it looks like. The idea that it's been historical, it's a project of colonialism that has never stayed the same since its inception. The minute that Europe decided it was Europe and it was white, the other was created. So thus and therefore, everything that we've done, proverbial we, has been infused with, impressed by, influenced by the decisions to keep the other away from us. And that us, not looking like me, has instituted what that means. We keep resources from people in different ways. We have bestowed privilege on people in different ways. And sometimes we even bestow identity on people in different ways. So institutionalized racism, while we kind of know what it is, it's going to always change. So we can never really pinpoint what it is. We can just figure who has the resources and who doesn't have it.
Okay.
For people who don't know, I ask people all the time, where'd you grow up? Who was at home with you? Who are you attracted to? What helps you make the decision that you make to live, to go down the street, to read this book, to look at this television show? Everything that you do is influenced by some type of institutionalized racist trace. So even though you may not know, take a step back and look at yourself first.
Well, my approach to that question would be first to kind of define what racism is. A lot of times I think we get confused and we confuse discrimination and prejudice with racism. But like all isms, racism comes from a particular doctrine, and that doctrine is white supremacy. So when you speak to institutionalized racism, you're talking about the residual effects of few centuries of a nation that was built on the doctrine of white supremacy, where that was the law of the land. So you have to let that kind of permeate for a minute, that many of the things that we would consider atrocious today were norms and totally legal. So, you know, sometimes when I hear this, the correlating of discrimination, one can be discriminatory and not be a racist. Totally. Racism is a system of a thought process that everything closer to white or to European is better. And so that's why it's so hard for us today to wipe away that, because we had centuries of that being legal. That was not atrocious to beat a black person, to whatever it is. We know that history. So going back to that, to me, that's the most accurate definition when I explain it, and that's whether they believe it or not, because the history reflects it. You know, all of the premises of racism is due to a systematic thought process that black is inferior.
So the way I conceptualized this question when I answered it, I said the most like blatant, digestible way to think about, well, like example of institutional racism would be Jim Crow. And so when people would think about that, they'll be like, oh, well, like, well, then isn't it over? And my answer would be, no, there's other ways to maybe think about how it, like the residual effects of this and how institutional racism has its like latent functions. So we can think about how our neighborhoods are still so racially segregated. So think about where you live, how many people you had who were of different ethnic backgrounds. How many people before you got here looked different than you? Did you think Beloit was super diverse when you got here? Did you feel your race? And I think one example that I think really hit home, or will hit home for Beloit is, in the terms of institutional racism, would be the way like illicit drug use on campus. So specifically marijuana use. So like in small Midwestern colleges, small liberal arts colleges all over the nation, it's just, because it's private, it's just more like relaxed. The way you deal with you know, drug use, and just think about how much weed you'll smell on campus in a day, and how that's dealt with on campus. You're not getting convicted. If you were convicted of marijuana use somewhere else, like you are in danger of losing your financial aid, like your government aid. So I think that to be in this like privileged space that people are systematically kept out of, where it's only a handful of people of color, only a handful of black people allowed in this space, is something to think about in these private liberal arts colleges. State colleges are where more students of color are funneled into, just because it is easier to go there, because it is more financially accessible versus schools like these for the most part. So I think it's just something to think about.
I come at this differently, and I'm in awe because I'm with a lot of qualitative people here, and I'm a number cruncher. That's all I do is crunch numbers. We get very large databases. We get the entire prison file for the state of Wisconsin. We add it together. We analyze it, and we say how many men have been incarcerated. And we put in a racial variable, and all of a sudden we discover that our 100,000 person prison file for the state of Wisconsin, that half of the young men in their 30s who are African American in the state of Wisconsin have been or are currently in prison. And we are blown away by it. And we don't see those numbers for whites when we look at how Wisconsin compares to other states in terms of incarcerating whites. It's typical. which is horrific for the rest of the world, but typical for the rest of the United States. But when we look at African Americans, it's hugely different. When we look at databases and we run it by race, if there's something very, very different there, and we're doing it for City Milwaukee, Milwaukee Public Schools, job training agencies, with some practical outcome in mind of how can we reduce barriers to employment or improve a program, and all of a sudden, there's this huge difference, you know, and on one level, people often say, oh, I can explain that, you know. That's an income variable or something, but we keep coming up with the same huge difference over and over again. And in the case of incarceration, it's a difference that is just, I've said I've done research for over 40 years. I have never, ever, ever studied an issue that had more of a disparate racial impact. I'll use one example. I see how our legislature treats drunk drivers. We're very reluctant to incarcerate drunk drivers, even when they hurt or kill people. But we incarcerate people for quantities of drugs and selling drugs. And I guess I'd sort of personally define institutional racism as if I'm a legislator and I can see my kids or I can see my neighbors in the laws I'm passing, then I make one kind of laws. But if it's other people that I don't know and that I have a lot of crazy ideas about, or not crazy ideas about, but they're not part of me, I make different standards. That to me is institutional racism, at least as it manifests itself in public policy.
Okay, so we talked about the difference between individual and institutions. So what role does individual action play in perpetuating these roles? We kind of touched on that, but then what role do institutional bodies play in these roles? This idea of the individual versus larger structures, and are they separate or interconnected in terms of how racism enacts itself?
Well, I definitely say any racist act is interconnected because it comes from a thought process that was conceived in white supremacy. But as far as the impact of the individual from the institution, individuals like, say, Donald Sterling with the NBA incident, you know, we'll all look at that and it's atrocious and, you know, it'll be, you know, kind of frowned upon. But it's kind of trickier when it comes to institutions. Brown versus Board of Education was passed in 1954. Here in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, the schools weren't integrated until 79. From 1954 to 79, it took that long for them to actually implement desegregation. They had an 11-year lawsuit from 65 to, you know, from 65 until they actually 14 years. But the lawsuit wasn't even put in till 11 years after Brown versus Board of Education was put in. So that's the difference. You know, you can it's kind of easy to, you know, corner that individual, but when it comes to the institutions, it's a bit harder. It's a bit harder because so many people gain from the power that these institutions wield. Just like when we spoke before about, you know, the structures and institutions are created entities. So when we look out, like me as a black male, every time I look at something and I see like this company or the product was founded in 18 this or that, I know that that was a company that was founded while we were deemed inhuman. You know, so what's the chances that there are corporate practices within all of these entities, because during their inception, all of these things were completely legal. So the practices that we would look at as atrocious could very well be tradition in all of these businesses. But because they're private entities, I'm not privy to, you know, corporate sessions or backroom chatters or whatever, but I would be a fool to not believe that they were there because it was legal then. So it would, you know, it's almost, you know, like when you put that blanket out there and say like everything is racist, people are like, you can't prove that. But the fact that it was legal and it was processes that racism created profit, and that's why we still have what we have, and so the corporate entity keeps hold of that. You know, Strom Thurmond was a senator, 10 years ago? And he was still professing segregation, and he sat in the Congress. You know, just 50 years ago, our Congress was debating, should black people have equal rights? That's what institutions do. It lingers. The residual effects stay because there's power to be wielded from the people who stood at the top of those entities. So while both of them are interconnected, the institution is why we're here today. If we were only dealing with individuals who were racist, we wouldn't have these problems. We were dealing with this because of the power structure behind the institutions and the way that they were founded. Even this country we call so great, it was founded on some principles that we call other countries today terrorists. We say that they're taking over things. We're looking at Russia and all these other places. And see, for me to even have this dialogue, if I was somebody who enjoyed a privilege, I would be censored or lose my job. But, you know, it took everything from me, so I can kind of say what I want.
There's part of me that agrees with you, Mark, in the sense that people think about institutions and it's just you feel helpless, right? You feel hopeless. It's this huge me against this huge them. But I also feel like individuals make up institutions in a way that all the messaging around institutional racism itself has been passed down through social interactions. So for individuals on day-to-day, very mundane basis, how you think about people will inevitably impact how you act upon people. And so if you you're fearful, if you are doubtful, if you feel like you're smarter than or you're better than because of whatever it is you think it is, you can probably trace it back to institutional racism and how you treat that person. So to me, being in the boardroom, I'm not in corporate America either, but I think we all had a little microcosm of that. Being in a space where it's predominantly white, at Beloit College for me, I know that everyone does not share what I think about black people, and so I have to constantly be just aware of what I hear, what I see, the little microaggressions we talk about. But I feel like those individuals have a chance to not necessarily, I want to say bring it down, change the whole institution, but they can affect that in the ways that maybe this disparate privilege that people have will have more power to do so. But I think that they're definitely interconnected and they definitely affect each other, kind of like a one give, one take kind of thing. But I feel like we can't let individuals off the hook if we feel like institutions are just unbearably changeable, you know? But I agree with what you're saying. Individuals do have a little bit more power than we think that we do.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think that it's this concept of structure and agency. But I think that because we have like these assigned meanings to these structures, but we also have like this innate like human likeness in us that wants to preserve our like lives or like livelihood, that we act in our own like self-interest. And so like we're gonna go to college and go and get the most advantage that we can, no matter if that's going to disadvantage someone else. And so you have to be very cognizant of the decisions that you make as a person in a privileged position, so that you can change and, you know, ultimately, I think, tilt, you know, the balance of power.
There was a study done in Milwaukee by a woman, Deva Pager, who's now at Harvard, where she looked at employment. She looked at 350 employers who were hiring entry-level workers, and she had these two teams of clean-cut college students, one pair black and one pair white, and she sent them to these jobs, and she varied, rather they mentioned somewhere in their application something that suggested they had a prison history, okay, an incarceration history. And what she found was that the white students, 34% of the white students with no hint of prison got called back. 17 of the white students with a something about prison, something that suggested they had been incarcerated got called back. For the African Americans, only 14% of the African Americans with no prison record, even less than the whites with a prison record, got called in, and only 5% of the African Americans who indicated they had some kind of a prison record. I tell this because she sent these people to 350 different companies, and so this is not institutional policy racism, this is HR people in hundreds of companies, unconsciously or consciously making decisions based on a very small amount of information. Okay, so my pitch is, this is your time. You can enlist us old people, and last I saw part of the panel last time, and I called my daughter, there's a young man here, a professor who's calling himself old. He doesn't know what old is. You can enlist us baby boomers in your cause, because there are lots of us who are very concerned about this, but this is your time. You have to crack this. You have to figure out. We deal with the institutional racism, especially public policy, by attacking those policies, showing them for what they are. But you got to figure out for us how we change those 350 HR people. We've got to change, and you've got to figure out how we pull that off. That's my urging. I'll support you, but I know the energy and the great ideas, they're in your hands now. The momentum is there, but also you're smart enough to do what our generation didn't get done.
So that's actually a nice way to go into the next question. I'll address to the audience first in terms of individual action and how we can go against these kind of institutionalized but also individualized acts of racism. So recently on campus, there were a number of hate crimes and other racist incidents perpetuated. The used were things such as nigger die, nigger bitch lovers, and their lives don't matter were used on public buildings and on other various places on campus. Subsequently, a town hall meeting covered by the local newspaper was convened to discuss these events at large. The fact that these crimes and incidences coincided with the start of the Black Lives Matter Beloit events and many other campus initiatives focused around race, power, and privilege has not escaped notice. So then, in your opinion, first, before we get to the panelists, what makes people so uncomfortable about talking about race and racism if everyone, mostly in this audience, said they believe that institutional racism actually exists? Here we go.
Okay, so hi, my name is Tamanisha, and I'm a senior at Beloit College. One of the reasons, so I attend all of these talks all the time, and I'm always so appalled at how many people say that they believe in things like institutional racism or racism alone, because outside of these talks, they don't. So I feel as if a lot of people go with the crowd. So someone looked around, oh, everyone's raising their hand, let me just raise my hand. But I feel as if a lot of the times people are so scared or they feel so guilty, oh, if someone did this, maybe they'll view all white people bad, and I'm not a bad white person, which is why I felt as if some people cried in the town hall meeting. But I feel as if there's no sense of doing something or acting on your own. I feel as if a lot of the students here are very impressionable and want something to follow or someone to lead them to come to this right consciousness to just do what is right. And I think that coinciding with the Black Lives Matter, they probably felt as if, oh my God, we're talking about race too much, and it was just them lashing out. I feel as if a lot of people on this campus treat racism as if it just doesn't exist, and when racist moments like these happen, they don't know what to do but to follow the flock just to not be offensive. So it's always this, I don't want to offend anyone, I don't want to be viewed as racist, but under the guise of doing that, then they still do come off as racist, to me.
For the individuals at the top, there's a microphone for you as well, just in case you have any comments.
I'm Antonio Jones, and one reason is, it's probably the way they feel. I mean, the reason why we don't have these conversations is because y'all probably think a black person might pop off, get crazy. If y'all be real with us, and if y'all curious about something that we do or something that we share, and y'all want to know about it, I mean, we ain't gonna tell y'all the secrets. I mean, But we're gonna give y'all some basic information about us. We will not pop off. If you curious, if you wanna know about us, like, just ask. We'll, like, walk y'all through the culture. I actually took one of my friends, like Tyler Geltmacher. I took him to Chicago, and we had fun. I showed him how to do things. In Inglewood. It's crazy out there. We should have these conversations more. I'm tired of having them with the same person, you know what I'm saying, that I see every day, AJ, you know. I mean, look, I don't mind having a conversation with anybody. If y'all curious, I'll walk you through it.
And we have one in the back and then one in the front.
I think sometimes people have an easier time admitting that institutional racism is real and that, society is racist, but have trouble admitting, well, I'm part of society. So by saying that admitting that society is racist, I'm admitting that I am racist, but they don't want to kind of make that connection and say, they're willing to say society is racist, institutions are racist, laws are racist, but are not willing to say, I'm racist. I'm working on it, but I am racist. I am part of society. I grew up in this, and that's a reality.
One more before we go back to the panel. Over here somewhere. Someone had their hand up? Up front?
It's a workout.
So I think that if someone genuinely believes that, one, that racism exists and that it's institutional and that it's embedded enough in our culture that it's also embedded in themselves, and they believe that racism is bad, then there's a fear that if you engage in conversations about it, you're going to slip up and you're going to reveal that, in fact, you have this element of you that is bad. And so it's sort of about facing that fear, at least on a personal level, and about not being afraid, but about thinking that it's worthwhile to face that fear. Does that make sense?
So then the audience, the panelists, we've kind of touched on this topic about why people aren't comfortable about race and racism. We talked about white supremacy. Can y'all, before we talk about why race is uncomfortable, talk about how you explain this idea of white supremacy in relation to the idea of race and racism and why it's so hard to talk about? I kind of threw that at you.
I mean, I think, the young man who stood up and said, ask me, well, I'm a pop off, so don't ask me. But I think in that respecting someone having a choice to pop off is what we're talking about. So the idea that you don't want to implicate yourself for fear of what's coming back at you. And I'm sorry to say, you gotta suck that shit up because it's just what it is. The idea that you think I'm supposed to carry the burden for everything, or someone that looks like me is supposed to carry the burden for everything, it's just unfair. So you can go and you can be a person who has privileged identities. I'm talking about whether it's straight, white, rich, male, gender passing, whatever. You get to cry. I don't. Because the minute I have an emotional response, I'm angry, right? I am, that poor black woman there, she's just so emotional, right? Because I'm female. Or the idea that, she doesn't know anything because she grew up around black people, she's from the South. All those things. My thing is the time comes to an end where you get to do some shit and I don't. So if you can ask that person, ask dude, he will take you around Inglewood, he will buy you some chicken from Harold's, you can feel real happy, get your mild sauce package. But if you ask me, I'm going to be honest with you and make you deal with yourself like I've been made to deal with myself for a long time.
And I kind of like the comment the sister made over here about with the guilt. I think it's guilt not even just on a personal level. We hear so many good things about the nation. Everything, we're supposed to be the best at everything. And so whenever the conversation of what's been done to descendants of Africans here comes up, that changes that narrative. And I think that's the reason why we still deal with it. is because we refuse to change the narrative of what this country is. I mean, it's like a battered woman who gets beat up and he constantly telling her he love her and she believe it. That's what's happened to not only blacks, but even people of non-color who don't support white supremacy. Because I know everybody in the room, in order to embrace the fact that racism is alive and well, you have to know that there are people who perpetuate it purposely. So if we can come to a consensus that that's taking place, then all of us in the room who don't share that have been duped. They've duped the whole world into believing that the premise of white supremacy was the best thought. And there are those who even are not purposely racist who are going to defend that because they have an interest in the power that has been built from that structure. So even when they don't in their heart feel that way, it's like, but you know, my whole generation, my papa and my mother, all of them were these type of people. They wasn't that bad. They loved me. You know, they worked for what they got, but they worked for it in an economy that was built with blood money. If I went out here today and robbed a bank and 30 years later my kids were wealthy, everybody would look to extract that wealth from them because they knew it was obtained through atrocious manner. This is what we're dealing with now. There are people who are empowered, and again, this is a conversation that a lot of people in this room ain't gonna never have because you don't want to deal with the backlash from having that statement. But that's the problem. We can't have that narrative. I can't go in front of the masses and say Thomas Jefferson was killing my people and raping my ancestors and there's no way he should be on Mount Rushmore. People would be like, he's a great man. Who are you to say that? You see what I'm saying? That narrative can't be had from a truth perspective. Everything is dealt with from the perspective of white supremacy, which is why you see the imagery you see today. And that's what I mean. That's what I meant, sister, about the institution being higher than the individual. I agree with your premise, but the point, for the particular purpose of America, the institutions have validated the racism. The hundreds and hundreds of years of it being legal has people acquiescing to the thought process of known racists like Thomas Jefferson, like other founding fathers and other founding members of this country. They get more recognition or appeasement than a person like Dr. Martin Luther King, which he's really more instrumental in the multifaceted America we live in today than any of the founding fathers. Under their rule, there was no diversity. He brought America, helped bring America to that diversity. So for me, back into the bun of the question, that's what makes it hard, because to liberate and for me to tell my true story is to make the whole narrative of America somewhat false. It becomes a story that's not so pleasant, you know.
So let's go off of that to the next question, because it actually leads into it. So we're talking about this idea of white supremacy and this idea of how the nation is founded. The nation is founded, according to our panelists and according to me too, on the idea of, embedded within it is the idea of race and racism. But then let's talk about this idea of the black body and how in that relationship of how the nation is understood and how we understand each other, how the black body itself is understood. So from imagined weapons and ferocity that prompted acts of violence by police officers and members of the public, to differential punishment of black children in schools, to efforts to systematically deny black majorities political power, as seen in Ferguson and other localities, to the ugly anti-black racism displayed by the fraternity at the University of Oklahoma, and seen in the professional soccer world. The black body seems to inspire fear, hatred, and contempt in spaces across a wide spectrum of society. So basically, what is so scary about the black body? And what do you see as the origins of this fear-laden construction of blackness, and how do we begin to work to deconstruct or counteract this notion?
I agree that the history of America is a huge part of it, and I think we have to learn that history. We have to learn again U.S. history that we didn't learn. I mean, I brought a book along. The half has never been told. Slavery and the Making of America and Capitalism. which I've been reading. I can only read about 5 pages at a time, and then I just can't read anymore. But you must read books like this. You must understand how deeply embedded it was in our founding and in the values that we set up to support. And then, you know, I'm jaundiced by this, you know, total immersion in the prison issue, but I truly believe that the criminalization of the African American male through the policies and practices that we've been perpetuating, we have defined the criminal as the black man, and we white people protect ourselves from the black man. And no place, normally, I don't even believe in trying to be a bad state, because I've given up on shame as a motivation for change. But in the case of mass incarceration, Wisconsin is the worst. We have the most shame. The positive side of that is no one else is doing it as badly as we are. We surely can change this. You know, there are all kinds of things we can do, and we have to. And then I'll throw out one other thing, which is when I was a little girl, I used to look at those pictures of the white-only drinking fountain and the colored drinking fountains, and I used to wonder, who were those white people that used that drinking fountain? And I'll give you a couple examples, but I've got more than that. You know, my husband and I are driving down Capitol Drive in Milwaukee on a Sunday morning. He takes the light on a very late yellow, and there's nobody around except there's a police car at the intersection. So here's a guy that drives through a red light, and there's nobody else around, and he didn't stop us. He didn't stop us because he wasn't on Capitol looking for aging white couples. He wasn't doing law enforcement. He was there for social control, and he was waiting for people of color to come through. And then we began enforcing all kinds of driving while poor, driving while black. Systemic, but it's a mirror. So as much as I'm troubled by our history and how we treat African Americans, I have to be equally troubled by the mirror that I see when I go about my daily life, and I see that I am treated differently. And I can't just say, lucky me. I get a little scared of the people that aren't treated that way, and I should be scared.
I think that black bodies, men, women, and trans people, are the physical manifestation of what white people think they've done wrong all their lives. And there's a constant fear of retaliation. So I have to police you, I have to surveil you, I have to monitor you, because what you do next, I better be on it. Because everything I've built here is founded upon you believing that you are inferior. It's founded upon you being afraid of me, founded upon you thinking that you have no power. So my thing is, every time I think about Black Lives Matter, I know it was founded by 3 black queer women. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder how hurtful it was for them to have to actually write all Black Lives Matter, right? Black Lives Matter. Because I know they matter, and guess what? The country we live in, the world we live in, the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy that we live in, know we matter. And because they know we matter, and they know we can pop off when we want to, they have to confine us in ways. And so this whole thing about, oh, I don't know what my response should be. You know what your response is fear. And my grandmother would say, you should be fearful of what I'm going to do to you, because you've been having your hand around my neck for centuries. That's all I have to say. How you gonna laugh at me, Devin?
No, no, because I thought about that too, but when reading this prompt, I almost wondered, like, why am I being asked this question? Because I almost just see myself as human at this point. I don't see myself as anything other than that, but I feel like the problem in this is that Black bodies aren't seen as human. And so because we are so dehumanized, it is that fear, and that's steeped in the legacy of slavery. And that manifests itself in things such as pain tolerance. There was a study that just came out that children, by the time they're 7 years old, think that Black children experience less pain. And so what does that mean, that once we hit the age of 7 years old, we think that someone who's Black experiences less pain? Does that mean that Black lives matter? Scratch that. Does that mean that all lives matter? Since that's something that people like to throw out there all the time. If I experience less pain than you, does my life matter? I don't know. I don't think so, since you think that I don't feel the way you feel. I don't experience pain at the same frequency as you feel pain. I don't know if I matter as much as you do. I don't know if I'm as human as you're human. At that point, I feel like I'm either superhuman, like you see with the story with Mike Brown. He gets shot up, but he can still run, charge at you, or you're an animal. I mean, I don't. So I think, to me, what it comes down to is dehumanization, because I don't know if Black people are visualizing themselves. Most Black people are visualizing themselves as something, because we have been, oppressed for so long, as getting together and, like, I'ma turn up on all of y'all, because it would have happened already. I don't know.
Well, I think it differs between I got a twofold answer for that. I think the fear was perpetuated by the propaganda, which started, like the sister said, in slavery. It wasn't like the country just, jumped in 2 feet first about enslaving people because of a color. Propaganda has been used throughout, and it's used today to perpetuate the white supremacist plot of whoever, the people who perpetuate it. But we was told that Africans weren't human, via 3/5 human clauses and just all the atrocious things that they told Europeans to make them feel comfortable dehumanizing Africans. And so now I believe that on the one part, you have a society that still buys into those stereotypes via some of the cops and different things that we have happening. But I think on the institutional level, I don't think the fear is that, this scary big Black man or something like that. It's more like J. Edgar Hoover pronounced when he felt like the Black Panthers was the greatest threat to the structure of America. Some young Black men who were college graduates who started an organization for self-defense in the face of police brutality in a nation that had beaten, hung Blacks for centuries, was considered to be the biggest threat to America. And this was the head of our greatest police force at the time. So going back to where I started, if you can't see past the original narrative, then I mean, just fold your tent, because you're not about this work. And I'm not trying to say that to push nobody away, but that's the reality. Without recognizing the true narrative of what it is, you'll never get to the bottom of this. That's why we keep putting Band-Aids on broken legs, and we constantly revisiting these same issues century after century. It's young Black kids right now getting abused by the police, getting sentenced to hundreds of years, while we still trying to figure out what we already know, but we don't want to believe it because it's too much work to fix it. All of the infrastructure we have has to be re-examined, but we don't want to do that. So that's where the biggest fear, I believe, lies, is in the institution. And so they push that fear in how they hire to keep you perpetuating that. Because like when the brother Malcolm X, It's believed that, you know, his assassination has something to do with him going to the UN to bring America up on charges for genocide. See, that's what people are saying now, but that narrative always is spun to, no, look, we're bringing aid, we're doing this. Until we see it for what it is, Black lives will not matter. They won't. They won't. You can get all this energy going, and as soon as the movement dies, if they stop shooting black, see, before they start shooting black kids, Black lives should have mattered. We shouldn't have had to have Mike Brown get shot for Black lives to matter. That only gave you the energy to look deeper. And so what I'm trying to tell you now is to look a little deeper before it has to be 10 kids killed or, you know, a whole nother ambush, some other kind of way that's more atrocious than, you know, one individual.
So then what would it actually mean or look like in society, or scratch society here? What would it look like here in the Beloit community and at the college if Black lives actually did matter, right? Because we had this pushback against the idea of the Black Lives Matter movement, both nationally and here. And we keep having it here, actually, this idea that, oh, it's not Black Lives Matter, it's all lives matter. Right? We know if all lives matter, we wouldn't have Black Lives Matter. So then what would it look like to actually have Beloit as a city and as a college for Black lives to actually matter? Let's bring to the audience first, we go back to the panel. Let's go to the back first. We got there, we have there.
Hi, my name is Lucas. I think what it'd look like for if within this city and within this college for Black Lives to Matter is that you wouldn't have the microaggressions. You wouldn't have where if a black student was walking down the street, then there might be a white student who looks away or stops their conversation with a friend. You wouldn't have where black students have trouble interacting with teachers because there's a divide, there's a lack of comfortability, where they're not seen to be on the same ground as the white students who are interacting with those teachers. You'd have it where you'd have more, I think, in administration of black people. You'd have more diversity among the faculty. You'd have where people as a whole, as they're going out into the community, don't see it as a dangerous place. They don't see it as something that they should avoid, where they would see the community as something that they should be a part of. You'd have it where as people go to Beloit, they would not see it as this like one good place to be at the college and the rest of it to be something that is just like ignored, and where the problems that are actually happening within the community are thought to be our problems because we're living here.
We had somebody over here, Namungo, in the back.
I think if Black Lives Matter on this campus, then I wouldn't have to have an argument in a class with a teacher about the artistic merit of Birth of a Nation and his wanting to show it in class. I think if Black Lives Matter on this campus, then I wouldn't essentially have a part-time job that I'm not paid for educating other white students on black people. I think that would be a nice start to Black Lives Matter on this campus.
Okay. We'll do one more before we go back to the panel up top.
I think that if Black Lives mattered on campus, then the mentality that I carry into my science classes would be just the same as the mentality I bring into my Chris classes. And beyond that too, I think if Black Lives mattered on this campus, then this entire room would be filled and I would see all of my classmates in this room because they truly cared about the process that is going on right now.
So panelists, let's bring your take into this. What would it look like in town and on this campus if Black lives actually did matter?
The freedom of not having to count.
The what?
The freedom of not having to count.
Okay.
Like I'm not being counted as one of the only black women on faculty. I'm not being counted as a student as one of 2 chocolate chips in a room full of white or non-white people. The idea that I think the idea that you can fill the halls all the time, right? Whether there's a tragedy or not a tragedy when it comes to things about black lives, right? And the idea that at some point, Anna Julia Cooper, one of the first prominent black intellectual women, said, not the boys less, but the girls more. The idea that we can think about the true, real problems that black women face on campuses like these. How you feel in terms of beauty, how you feel in terms of inclusion, how you feel in terms of you just walking and having your mental health be right. If Black Lives Matter in that sense, the individual, all the way up to the macro level of the institution, would just run a whole lot smoother by me not having to count.
I can tell you what I would want for Milwaukee. It was a strange process that we had because the newspaper didn't even cover mass incarceration when our studies came out. But then they had their black journalist cover it, and at first I resented it because I thought, oh yeah, it's a black issue, and so the regular reporters aren't covering it, but James Causey is. But it turned out to be wonderful because Causey was a fabulous reporter, and he covered this from all different angles. And we had almost no white politicians who wanted to get in front of this in any way whatsoever. And so all the leadership in town that really addressed this were African Americans and Latinos. And there's something really wonderful about being the minority, for me, on something that I don't know that much about anyway. And so what I really want to see is that this conversation is dominated by people of color, that they're the ones who shape this conversation, and we try to fit in, and we try to be intelligent and not say things stupid, but I encourage people to say things stupid. I've certainly done enough of it in the last 2 years. Get used to it, like you say. Get used to it. You're going to say stupid things. But I genuinely believe a shift in leadership. But then we like to talk a lot in Milwaukee, and maybe you do too, about what to do about our inner city. We have an outer city problem. We're trying to decide how to raise $500 million to build a basketball gym in our town, We were going to spend $1 billion on a freeway extension so that the commute time would be less in the city. Our values are really messed up. And we need people to make fun of us and say, come on, your values are screwed up. You're part of the problem, too. You're the big part of the problem. And I don't think that's going to come from the white community, assuming we've got a community. I think it's going to come from the leadership of people of color who see these things much more clearly than any of the rest of us do at this point, and see us much more clearly. So that's what I hope for Milwaukee and maybe the rest of the state, too.
I think I would like to see the way people talk about the town change. Not the town, excuse me, the city change. I think there is very disgusting language used towards people from the city. I think that if people aren't using people for research, quote, studying down, using them for BPHI or anything, the Duffy, I don't know, whatever people use the city for, if it's not for any of those things, then they feel like they couldn't be bothered, or those people can't come and spend time, and they can't reach out and be here in our space, and that bothers me a lot, because if you think about it, the way the campus is very geographically secluded, and so I think that we really need to think about how we encourage people to come on campus, and how when they get here we treat them. I was just working in the sports center, and my boss told me that sometimes students complain about people being in the gym from the city, and they pay to work out there. Why can't they be here when they're paying members of the gym? So the fact that people feel some kind of uneasiness when it isn't, you know, as a friend said, some old white couple coming and, you know, watching a movie or coming to, you know, a talk on campus, like, that's an issue. So really think about and re-examine the way we talk about people, or the fact that you can't deal with, or you couldn't be bothered with the city unless you're buying drugs from the city. And think about how the relationship with the campus and how we operate in the crime that you're so afraid of in the city. It's relational. I think it's important to consider. If you're so afraid of the sketchy town, then stop adding to the sketchiness of the town. It's ridiculous. I don't know.
Well, for me, that's a real difficult question, because I'm not big on dreaming. Because I guess just being realistic, I just don't believe that that's something that even has to happen. I don't believe everybody has to love black people for the things that's happening not to happen. In the sense of that, what I would say is just the justification of mistreatment of blacks needs to stop. You know, the justification that the drug war is somehow justified, and that's why all the young black men, black and brown, are in jail, or Michael Brown sagging pants and the 99-cent cigars he snatched somehow warranted his murder. That's what has to stop. I don't know that I need you to love me, I just don't need you to hate me. You know, I don't need you to, you know, feel like I don't deserve to give my kids an opportunity. So, and forgive me for kind of dancing around the question, but I just, like I say, I'm not into dreaming, but I do believe that we can attain a more civilized society that's not allowing one group of people to just take all the blunt of everything. Because I mean, like I say, this just even having these conversations, I do some work sometimes around here, I get burnt out. I get burnt out talking about it, because I feel like I'm constantly having to prove to somebody that it's a bottle of water sitting here. And nobody sees the bottle of water though. Everybody's saying, where the water at, where the water at, but it's sitting right there. And that's how this racism is. I mean, we talking about Mike Brown. It was a young black brother killed downtown Beloit. There was no riot. There was no uproar about that. And the video is on YouTube. I urge any of you to look at that video and say that that car wasn't past the officers before he got shot. Now, nobody's saying that here. Nobody's bringing that up. Nobody's looking for justice for Darius, because we don't have the resources here to bring all the media attention and all that. That's what I want to see. I want to see us be able to see wrong go over to blacks and us see it as wrong. Sorry about that. But yeah, that's my utopia, man. I don't, you know, I can comply with anybody else. I want to work for what I get. I don't want somebody to give me something. But you know, Chris Rock made a statement I saw one time about some black issues, and he said he just wished that black men had the opportunity to make a mistake. When he first said that, I was like, you know, what you mean? What kind of sense that make? But what he was saying is, you know, like Mike Brown, if I snatch a couple of cigars, man, don't kill me. Don't take me off the planet because I stole some cigars. Don't demify me for the rest of my life because I sold some crack, and you know that 1 out of every 2 children in Wisconsin under the age of 18 living below the poverty line. So where you at mad about him not eating, but you mad about me doing something trying to eat? You know what I'm saying? And you know that you got a system that's been compiled over the years that's oppressing people. You know, and like I say, that's what burns me out, because I know that the voices is not being heard enough. You know, and even when it's being heard, there's no action to it. You know, somebody who or say somebody on the city council, if it's between them and being friends with somebody who, you know, got zeros behind their name, who cares about the little black kids in the male community? Who cares about the fact they got tickets that they going to jail for when they turn 18 that they accumulated as a juvenile? We had a juvenile administrator say that the juvenile system is not designed to do that. But we still have pushback here in the city of Beloit against children who are accumulating fines as juveniles, and when they turn 18, they go to jail. We got people fighting against that we should be able to keep that in. But we trying to figure out why black lives don't matter. It's like, oh, we didn't do that. We did that in good faith. Well, whether or not your intentions was well intended or not, kids going to jail. So when you gonna deal with the water on the table? When you gonna deal with that?
So that goes back to the idea that I had about the black body being this physical manifestation of the fear. If you get the young people, you gotta worry about the next generation. If you incarcerate a generation of people, taking away their rights, taking away their ability to build good homes, right? Whether those homes are female-centered or not, right? Taking away their ability to get education, however we think about education, taking away their ability to make good decisions,
Taking away the right to vote.
taking away their right to vote, then you are pretty much crippling any kind of progress you had to make. So it's a targeted situation. That's why I keep saying that Black lives do matter, and people know it. The institutions know it. What you said, we've all said about why is it that a black person can't make a mistake? Think about Rakia Boyd. She had a car accident, knocked on the door for help, and somebody shot her. So it's never about always a criminal activity. It's the fact that she's breathing and she's black. There are plenty of black women who are also in jail because of this drug stuff. Devin, Devin's one of my students. So we know what it means to have the black person be the constant threat. The breathing black person is a constant threat because their physicality embodies this resistance. So it's a targeted, orchestrated, calculative effort to succumb that body.
At the same time, what Devin said, we also know that on every college campus, we're studying jail population for marijuana in Milwaukee. It's 85% black. Can you tell me how that works? We have Marquette University, Milwaukee School of Engineering, and UWM, and they're all white. I mean, they're not all white, but they're all very majority white. We have tremendous amount of drug use, but college kids who are white do not worry about prison when they decide whether to use drugs. Their life isn't destroyed when they use drugs. We know privilege. Those of us who live at universities, we know privilege because our kids all have it. It's like Devin said. And kids exactly the same age with exactly the same talents, they're getting prison records that we're keeping on the internet for the rest of their lives. They're never getting away from them. And we have to change that. If we don't give people second chances for things that we don't even punish other people for, we will destroy our society.
I would say give them a first chance, right? So the idea that this white student at UW, you said Milwaukee?
It's the UWM, we got it.
Is a recreational drug user. But the black person there is the drug dealer. The conceptualization of how we think about blackness, the white, they're experimenting. The black person is criminal because their family did it. It's historical, it's generational for them. So the first chance, I think, is what needs to be given. Because there's no chance right now.
I had a man try to break into my house one night. I called the police. I live 2 blocks from campus. 2 minutes, the police got there. I thought he was probably on drugs, but I didn't share that. I just said, somebody's trying to break into my house. It's the middle of the night. It was a very drunk college student who was a mile away from the party he was trying to break into. You know what the police did? They drove him home. They drove him home. Do I have to tell you what color he was? I don't think so. If I would have told the police, I think there's a black man trying to break into my home, I shudder to think what would have happened. First chance.
Okay, so on that note, let's open it up to the audience. And before I forget, I'm sorry, Bill, we have this thing called Sustained Dialogue here on campus. So if we want to put our money where our mouths are, and you're a student, faculty, or staff member at Beloit, you want to, Bill is passing, is it passed around, Bill? There is this sheet of paper going around, and sorry, we're not expanded to the community yet. We hope to do that in the future. But if you're a student, faculty, or staff member and want to engage in these issues, we're talking about race and power again next semester, correct, Cecil? Sign up and actually do this action. So it's nice to play lip service here, but let's continue the conversation and continue the action as we go further past this semester, past the summer, into the fall. Now, we have got about 20 minutes left. Let's open it up for question and answer from the audience. Yes, back there. Yep.
So we're talking about how we need to change the system, and
Please stand up, Charlotte.
like you said, we need to change the narrative. How do we change the narrative when in states across the country they are deciding to opt out of the U.S. history AP exam, which touches on these things? They're taking slavery out of their books because it makes us look bad as Americans. How do we change that? Do we change the narrative so we make a new narrative, or do we need to educate people more? Because I know when I was in AP U.S. history, we kept slavery around in the South because of the economic factor of it, but I think there's a lot more to that. We didn't keep it around because of the economic factor. We kept it around because we didn't want black people succeeding. And there's a lot more to that. And so how do we change that? Do we need to rewrite a narrative, or do we need to just let everyone know the real narrative?
Before you answer that question, that's actually a good point. How many of you, especially the younger, well, not everybody, how many actually learned about slavery or something about slavery in high school? How many learned about the civil rights movement? Hands with, less hands, okay. Just interested to know, go ahead. Go ahead. Anyone wants to answer that question.
As far as changing it, I mean, if I had the flat out answer, I sure to tell you, but the narrative, though, I think the narrative definitely has to stay the truth. I think that's why where we at now. If you start, I read something about Texas trying to use the term indentured servitude or whatever, and again, that's why we at the place we at, because we're not dealing with the truth of it. I know that's one of my theories, especially here in Wisconsin, with me having kids in the school system. There's definitely not enough talk about the contributions of African Americans, not only post-slavery, but pre-slavery. And that's what allows that narrative of looking at a Mike Brown and seeing, what you believe to be some penitentiary on the way guy, and not, Mansa Musa or Hotep or somebody who invented medicine, or these different narratives that come out of Africa. So I think that's one of the ways to reverse it. That's always been a premise of mine in schools, where you see always black people taking the African American studies, but white America is more in need of that. White America is more in need of knowing that blacks were not just these, or what Europeans perceived to be these clothesless, cannibalistic people. They were not that. They was in a climate where they probably just wore scanty clothes, just like in Miami or somewhere, you know what I'm saying? I mean, seriously, we laugh, but I'm so serious. And what we fail to realize is that a nation that once thought the earth was flat did a lot of things that were unscientific. And this is not to desecrate European history or anything, but just they killed Galileo because he knew the earth was round. I mean, think about that. Think about the type of environment that produces where mental and excellence is being murdered. You know what I'm saying? These are the same people who founded a country that we believe to be the best. Now, I'm not saying that things don't evolve, but until we get, again, to that true narrative, You know what I'm saying? My criminal record is relevant in everything I do. You know why? Because it's the truth. Because it happened. Those things, well, I ain't gonna say all of it was the truth, but I was incarcerated for it and convicted. So as far as societal terms go, that's the truth. And nobody will let me not forget, they won't let me forget that. But when a black person brings up the atrocious things, and the way that it's explained away is because it wasn't illegal. So now because 400 years of rape and murder and all this wasn't illegal, it's no longer relevant? Not true. And so going back to what the sister said, to me the start is just, again, just really taking a narrative and changing it. The fact that we believe men who we would look at today and I mean, nobody in here would appreciate what they see. People are quoting these men as if when they quote these men, they're quoting, you know, something close to right. And that was something that I heard in the midst of the Trayvon Martin issue. I kept hearing how, while what Zimmerman did could be perceived as immoral, it wasn't illegal. And that was the first time that it dawned on me that we lived in a system that really was not concerned with legalities. I mean, with moralities. It's more concerned with what's on paper legal. And that's all it took for slavery to be legal. The same system, the courts, the Supreme Court justices, all of these systems were in place during slavery. So to make it as if this experiment of democracy is in and of itself moral, that there dispels that. Because the same systems were in place when all of these things that we're saying are atrocious were not atrocious. They were okay. We had Supreme Court justices saying that in the Dred Scott case that no white man had to obey any laws as it pertained to blacks. You can go look that up now. That's still in the documents. So until again, you change, I know it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse, but if you don't change the narrative, nothing changes. That's why we keep backsliding. You know, like I say, 50 years ago, some of the distinguished congressmen of our country was debating if black people should be included. That was just 50 years ago. I'm 41. Just 50 years ago, they was having what they perceived to be intellectual debates about a civil rights bill. 50 years ago.
Real briefly, I don't think we're going to take down Mount Rushmore, although it's not a bad idea.
They shot the nose off the Sphinx.
There is a movement.
I know that's right.
There is a movement to take this guy off the $20 bill. I encourage a little subversive work on that. Andrew Jackson, replace him with a woman. Why would we take Andrew Jackson off? When he died, he had a slave camp with 169 people that he imprisoned. He amassed these people. He went from owning 9 people to 169 by what? Stealing their babies, taking money for other people's babies and children. This is a very bad man who also annihilated thousands of Indians, Native Americans. So maybe we do at least that much. We don't bring down Mount Rushmore, but we certainly don't carry this ugly picture around with us, you know, because he's a slave owner. That's our history. I don't like it. Let's change it.
I wish I had $20.
Not kidding. I don't want you to have this.
So I say that to be facetious, but I'm serious in terms of I wish I had the resources to change narratives past stories I can tell. So as long as you situate your story in a global narrative, U.S. slavery is one of the most insidious, just deleterious, just mean, downright nasty systems that this country has ever been a part of. But it didn't start here. Only 20% of the transatlantic slave trade people came through the U.S. There's another America that y'all might know about called South America that is huge in the sense of how we think about race, right? That narrative does not start or end with us in this particular country, but the idea that we were one of the last to make the changes, what was going on, I think has a lot of implications for how we deal with each other. So your narrative, your story, however it may be, however you may implicate yourself in telling it, you gotta tell the truth. If you don't tell the truth, there's nothing that I can do for you or anyone else here can do for you. All the ugliness, the meanness, yeah, I may be a queen, but I throw shade too. Have that complexity, because it's inherent in you being a human being. Be human when you tell your story. So I can say to someone, I can really mess up and hurt Devin's feelings, but because she sees me as a human being, there's redemption there, right? Or you talk to this person who didn't give me her $20, she didn't think I stole it. You know, like the idea that there's some type of exchange to be made there as long as there's truth there. So the narrative, I think, begins with the individual telling the truth, telling their truth against someone else's truth, right? So it's not the truth, but a truth.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking about Charlotte's question about, was it about Texas originally? Yeah, I was just worried about that because as far as I know, Texas sets the standards for education nationally, so that's very horrifying that they're taking these narratives out because that means what will students be learning all over the nation. And so, I mean, what does this mean for the education majors or whoever? I mean, this is a liberal arts college, so really we can all end up doing whatever, I don't know. Whatever you all end up doing, I mean, like, if you end up doing education policy, like, whatever, like, really, like, let's figure out a way to, like, get these narratives in there, and if we don't, like, teach your kids that, you know, narrative, like, teach your kids the truth, or teach your nieces, nephews, cousins, whatever, like, these narratives can be passed down word of mouth. Like, it doesn't need to be only taught through institutional power. I think that we have more agency and more power than we know, than we give ourselves. And if we all do it on an individual basis and take ownership on such tiny levels, those small little individual interactions can build up and make those big interactions and push back on that big Texas machine, whatever.
Because somebody wrote the textbook, right?
Yeah.
Somebody wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
You write your own textbook.
Any questions or comments? We got one in the back.
Nicole.
Oh, and one over here too. Okay, so we'll go back and then here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I believe in a lot of ways we need to take responsibility as Black people to kind of redefine that Black Lives Matter to Black people. Because we do a lot of things for ourselves, I mean, and people won't value us if we don't value each other. So, I mean, we just got to keep it in mind to, I mean, kind of study our history. I mean, get in touch with the quote-unquote lost history that was never lost. We just need to get in tune with it so we can kind of value our own selves and other people will value us. So, I mean, kind of take responsibility. Like the panelists said on the end, there are things that white people will be able to do, but for the most part, it's going to be a lot of conversations in the Black community that's going to make Black Lives Matter. So we just need to kind of keep our own responsibility amongst ourselves as well as thinking about the establishment as well, because they have a lot of responsibilities as well. So,
can I respond to that right quick? Mm-hmm. You know, for me, I used to agree with you. I don't. The idea that Black people have loved themselves for a long time, through the violence, through the psychological damage. No one cares. The way that white supremacy is kind of just ingrained in us, it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter what we do in terms of to each other, because if we're actually, the actions we do to each other is a product of that in the first place. So the idea that I do believe in community building, coalition building, self-love, self-healing is important, but not for an outside person to validate us. We validate ourselves, but what we do in here, we can't really have anything about what they do to us because they got to do that on their own too. So it's not about a Black on Black thing, it's about a Black on white supremacy thing.
when we see each other, more times than not, it's more of an aggressive thing with Black male. We see each other.
This is what I want to use I statements. Okay? So go ahead.
When I see another Black man, I might mean mug him instead of saying, "What's up, brother? How you doing?" It's more of a pride kind of thing. I mean, we don't really love each other the way that we should, as far as the aspect of we don't know who we might have came from the same hut in Africa. We don't know. This could actually be my cousin, my brother. We don't know what hut we came from in Africa.
We might be cousins.
We might be cousins. We
but
don't
my
know.
thing is,
But we don't look at each other like that though.
Why do you mean mug him?
It's a cultural, you might want to do something to me, so I'm going to make sure I'm tougher than you kind of thing that we need to get over as a people.
Do something like what?
Well, we don't really fear each other, but just more like we just like kind of mean mug each other, like we know how to edge over each other, you know what I mean?
How to
I'm
what?
I'm tougher than you.
You tougher, okay?
Yeah.
So it's aggression.
Kind of
Maybe it's a fight for territory, like this is my resources, this is your resources. Y'all are living in a place where you didn't build it. Someone there was there before you. The socialization of you two being in that space together, somebody did that to you. Whether you think about it or not, the consciousness of having to see another black man and feel like you have to be aggressive towards him, you ain't set that up. You didn't set that up. People talk about black women being mean to each other all the time. We ain't set that up. It's the idea about how people can keep resources from us, and therefore we're fighting for what we think this material thing is that we should really love, when it's ourselves that we should love. Not another person, but ourselves. So I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, it's ourselves. We need to love ourselves, and then other people will love us as well.
No, I don't think that.
If I can jump in right here.
I think if you loved yourself, then you wouldn't need other people to love you.
Right.
Right? So if you actually, I wasn't going to talk, but I got to talk about this. Everyone clowns on Kanye. I'm not a big Kanye fan, but he practices absolute black self-love to the fullest extent of black self-love he can do, right? Whether you like it or not, he does. But by doing that, he does not need anybody else to tell him that he is worthy. He tells himself every day in that mirror that he is worthy. But that is something that I think as a community, if we could actually truly tell ourselves that we are worthy and we are black women, we are beautiful. We can wear our hair natural. We ain't got to worry about putting a permit. If you put a permit, put a permit because you want to do it, not because you think it's beautiful, right? So I think if we actually practice pure self-love, we wouldn't care if everybody else didn't love us. We would love ourselves enough to cooperate, build coalitions, build communities, and actually educate our own youth about the history that needs to be taught, not the majority's history.
Because going to what you were saying about if you love yourself, other people will love you. Those viewpoints, and I always look at them, not saying that you are, but when I hear them questions like on the news or something, like they are planned. Because when you say that, right, there was a time when black people wasn't mean mugging and all that. Right. Bloody Sunday in Selma. Them people was trying to get voters' rights. They was massacred. You know what I'm saying? Dr. King, which I don't know if a lot of people in the room know, in '99 in a courtroom in Tennessee, the government was found to have conspired to his death. That's in the court records, so you could look that up. In Shelby County, Tennessee, the government was found to be co-conspirators of that. So he wasn't sagging his pants, he had self-love, he demonstrated all of that. So white supremacy don't care if you love yourself or not. Again, we got to understand that that's a thought process that everything white is best, and that deserves everything, and that's the way our country ran legally. So when we talk when we talk about residual effects, we talk about institutions that was built on that. These institutions have been in place since that was the law of the land. So now you have these institutions trying to figure out, how do I not do what I was designed to do? Because it's not, we want to say, oh, let's live up to be the America we were designed to be. No, the institutions are fulfilling the prophecy. They're doing exactly what the Founding Fathers set them in place to do. That was a country who was overran with famine, looking for a way to come up. They used blacks' backs, free slavery, to become rich. That was the motivation. And now the motivation is maintaining that. So in order to maintain that, I have to keep some of them things in place. Let a few of y'all through, but look at it. It's like I say, it's the water on the table.
The back, we got the back there, and we got the front here.
Okay. I'm Professor Esperanza from the Anthropology Department. I wanted to piggyback off of an earlier statement that Professor Patterson had talked about in terms of narrative. I think it's really important for us in this community to think about honoring the narratives of people of color, especially in moments when they talk about instances of microaggression or racism. What I often see on this campus and outside of this campus, many communities, but what I often see is when students of color, when people of color are talking about instances of racism that have happened to them, and I often see knee-jerk reactions, honestly, from white people. No, maybe you've misinterpreted. Maybe you're just kind of imagining things. And I would like us to think about how that type of knee-jerk reaction is a form of institutionalized racism, how that is a form of enforcing the fact that somebody's real narrative of their own experience is secondary to something larger that has been in place for a long time. So stop for a second before you deny somebody's claims of microaggression or institutionalized racism. Give yourself a chance to listen and to say, okay, tell me more about it, and to hear, as opposed to saying, well, no, you've misinterpreted, because I doubt that we are all on hallucinogens as people of color. I'm allergic to alcohol. I can't drink anything. I think that even for myself, to talk to people about instances of racism, it's very difficult to be acknowledged, and there's a burden and there's a stress in always having to prove that that bottle of water is there. So, thanks.
Thank you. Let's go back, and we have one up front. And then one, okay, so we'll go there, and up.
Can I just make a comment for that? I think that just going off of that, for me and my friends, it didn't take that spray painting for us to feel like nigga die. It really didn't. We've been feeling that since like early first semester. We felt outraged early on, and we discussed that early on with people, and it got shrugged off over and over and over and over again. And I think the thing is, it finally made y'all see it, and it made y'all cry, and it made y'all feel uncomfortable, but we were just like, okay.
Now they writing on the wall.
Hi, I was going to sit silent until the brother in the balcony was trying to say something about accountability. So I'm going to bring up three women who are all black who stressed the same point. In the pages of Essence magazine before she left, Susan Taylor said that 90% of fourth graders in our community...
Could you stand up, sir? I'm sorry, so we could...
Sure. 90% of fourth graders in our community do not read at proficiency level. It has nothing to do with white people. Before she left Essence to begin the National Cares Movement, Ayanna Vincent put all of her business out there, all of it, in terms of accountability that she had as a black woman first, who bore children on this earth that had nothing to do with white people. She put it all out, and this was even before Oprah. And then finally, Terry Williams, who went back. She went public with her battle with clinical depression in the pages of her book, Black Pain. All of it can be Googled. And these are three black women who are in New York, who are friends, who talk honestly about the accountability in our community. I wasn't going to say anything until the brother upstairs, whoever he is, was talking about accountability. On any church in Chicago, on any given night, you can fill up every single pew with mourning black mothers and fathers who have lost their children at the hands of black people. Again, it has nothing to do with white people. Until we clean up our house, in our communities, in our homes first, there's a reason why the #1 show in the country right now has to deal with black dysfunction. It's putting things out that we need to talk about in our community honestly and openly. What white people would really like to see before we can accuse them of not being honest is accountability first, because at the end of the day, it is black women who bear black children, who kill other black children, trying to be something in life.
Okay. I want to respond?
If I could respond to that.
Thank you, because I can.
While I totally concur with you about the black black on black things need to cease. But again, that term within and of itself to me was a term coined from somebody who was probably a plant. No one speaks about white on white crime. And it's just as high. The
Most
numbers
murders interracial.
The numbers don't support what you're saying, because if it was okay to vilify a group of people because of how they treat each other, then we could go do that for each race. Crime is usually opportunistic, and because we live in such a segregated society, that's why you see that. So again, while I'm not dismissing that I'm with you whenever you want to get out here and stop some black on black, but if you're using black on black crime to null and void the years and centuries of oppression done by this system, then I can't roll with you. Because that's not a trade-off. That's not a trade-off. Just like I said again, when you bring that up like it's justification, then why did they kill King? We didn't have those type of atrocities happen back then. Why did J. Edgar Hoover say that the Black Panther Party was the biggest threat to America? None of these entities that you speak of exist then. When all the lynchings was going on and all that, none of that stuff existed then. So if we could go back in history and those things didn't happen, then I might be able to roll with you. But the fact that that didn't come after that. We didn't start getting mistreated after black on black crime. Black on black crime came after the mistreatment.
And also the idea that the 3 black women said that it's our duty as people who bear black children, who bear guns to kill our black children. That's a, see how I'm about to pop off?
Yeah. I feel you. Huh?
The way that we demonize black women and how they raise their children, how they raise your children, how they raise your children in your absence. The idea is that the household itself was one of the first places where there's any kind of domination ever comes up. Bell Hooks will tell you that, right? Who's also a black woman who will say black on black crime ain't what we do anyway. For those 3 black women that you read, there's about 475,000 other black women who would disagree. So we can't keep looking at this black female identity as a monolithic thing. Those women who have that power to say that, they were published in magazines, they have published in books. They probably had white publishers who may have edited that for them. And so when you read it and you take it as truth, this is about writing your own textbook, right? So read something else about my soror from Essence. Read some other her later stuff, right? She won't say that before. So just think about how you conceptualize what black motherhood does alongside of black fatherhood. There are plenty of mothers and fathers and non-mothers and non-fathers who love black children who would say to you, I don't want to kill my baby. I don't want nobody to mess with that. But you can't think about it being one person's problem. It's a systemic problem that we need to be talking about, not individual problem in that sense. What'd you say?
Where did they get the guns from?
I know that's right. We make them in the basement with the crack cocaine.
Can I say, I want to just mention, I have no insight into that's helpful, but I do want to say something about the front of the line and the back of the line and affirmative action, because when we look, we do a lot of work for Milwaukee Public Schools, and we look at all these factors that impact the children and families in the neighborhoods that have very, very high crime rates and have huge amounts of poverty. And when the recession came, we look at the company reports for the EEOC. The large companies all have to report the racial makeup of their workforce. So all the companies with 100 or more workers in Milwaukee area, 4 counties, were reporting this. And 24% of the African American men with blue-collar jobs working for those companies lost their jobs during the first 2 years of the recession. 24%, 1 out of 4. We do work with the NAACP on construction jobs, and we found that the African-American men who got laid off from their construction jobs had 11 months of seniority on the whites who got laid off. We knew from foreclosure that we mapped foreclosures that the major banks in Wisconsin and internationally targeted African Americans and Latinos for housing loans when those housing prices were going up and people were desperate for income, and then yanked the bottom out of them. And so we had hundreds of foreclosures. So we had African Americans at the front of the line to lose their jobs during the recession, at the front of the line to lose their houses during the recession, and to lose their right to build houses. We saw all that, and we documented it. But what we don't see is African Americans being put at the front of the line for jobs, for job programs. And so like I say, I can't help with the crime. I can't help with the debate over the crime, but I do see the crime statistics and the intensity. I see them in exactly the same neighborhoods that I saw decimated in Milwaukee during the recession. And we're just like, moving on. We got a Buck Stadium to build, give us a break here. We got work to do. We're moving on. We can't move on that way. And this is where, we can't say, you're a community. Nobody ever accuses whites of being a community, but you're a community. It's a value. I wish we were. It's a value, but we can't just move on. And we have to see that economic package as part of what is also driving these horrific crime levels for children in low-income neighborhoods, and forcing people to live in those neighborhoods because they have lost their jobs and they do have to live in the poorest housing.
All right, so we're running out of time, so we're going to go right down here and then right up there, and then we have to start wrapping it up. I'm sorry. No, right there.
Good evening, everybody. I appreciate this conversation. I'm asking this because, in the interest of foresight, I'm approaching 30 this year, which is not old, of course, but it is another level of maturity in another decade. And it reminds me of a conversation. I don't know if anybody has heard the new Kendrick Lamar album, which I believe is one of the most, already in less than a week, one of the most prolific albums to ever come out, period. Spoiler alert, in the album, he has a conversation with Tupac Shakur. And it is a one-on-one dialogue with Tupac Shakur. It's not just a tape. At least that's the way it's constructed. And Tupac speaks, and he says that when you turn 30, the system sucks the life out of you, and you have to act when you're young and when you have energy and you want to shoot back and you want to defend yourself and your people. And that struck me because as I approach 30, I wonder, for anyone here, I guess, who is 30 or over, does your willingness to act or to make a difference or to construct social change in somehow or address a social issue, does that decrease as you get older? And I have a family now, so I'm not I'm a former BSU president, so when I was marching against social justice issues in Whitewater 10 years ago, here I am now with 4 kids to raise, a wife to support, a home, and a number of other different things, including upward mobility in the career that I'm in. Considering all those factors, would you say that your willingness to act or to speak out decreases as you get older? And if so, how do you change that?
Well, for me, it didn't decrease, definitely didn't decrease. Like yourself, I'm a father of 6, and it just increased for me because even though there's many things that I've been through that I probably, I guess in that light, I'm taking a page out of Dr. King. It don't matter if I see it, but it's about my kids. And being that I have 5 boys and 1 girl, I'm scared every day, about my kids. My oldest 2 is 23 and 22, so I'm totally fearful, you know what I'm saying? Because I have to have that conversation because I know everybody don't want to respect the bottom on the table. So when it comes to the kids, I really have to have them talks. And when my son first went off to college in Iowa, he experienced that, So now for me, brother, going back to your question, it increased for me because when I look at the kids, sometimes when certain things happen, And you know, it really hurt me. It really hurt me because I see some kids whose parents don't have a clue. And they really ain't preparing the kid for what he gonna have to deal with. And so, you know, kids end up having to figure it out. And the problem is when they have to figure it out, usually they gotta go through them bars because they gonna make some bad decisions, because it's a lot for a teenager or even, you know, some smaller than that. Like here in Wisconsin, like I said again, under 18, 1 out of every 2 black children you see are below the poverty line. So think about that when you leave here. Think about every time you see a little black kid, 1 of the 2, if you've seen 4, 2 of them is living below the poverty line in a state that's got a lot of wealth, got a lot of money, got a lot going on. There's no reason for that. Blacks only constitute 6% of the population. How is it that that few people can't get nothing to eat? Can't get no job. You ain't even got a high population. Just like the sister was saying, them being the worst, that makes it even worse because you don't even have a large population of blacks and you still the worst. You ain't got but a few to deal with and you don't want to, you know, give them nothing. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, for me though, brother, like I say, I know I got off topic, but for me it's heightened. Because at this stage of the game, for me, as I get older, I got less to lose. I ain't got nothing to gain, but I ain't got nothing to do but fight. That's all I got.
You know, I have conversations with my close friends all the time about, I think I'm getting soft.
Is it soft?
This is soft. I told Nicole this too, you know, sometimes I think about when things like that's happened recently over the past few months, posters being ripped down, Angela Davis's face is being scratched out. You know, if that was me in college, something would be burning right now, right? The idea that, they got the right ones, they had me, then something else would have happened. And I'm thinking now, you know, Rick, I hear you, because it's not so much about you getting older, it's that you've kind of had these material things that have status. And you get comfortable with I want to live in a house. No one grows up saying, I want to be broke. Who does that, right? No one says, I don't want to eat all day today. Or, I wish I'll never, ever, ever, ever be able to walk. The idea that what we think is naturally supposed to be given to us, there are people here who have to fight for that every day. And once you get it, and you ain't had it, you gonna give it up? So, it's about what we buy into that makes us, I would say, soft in a way, but it's about you picking and choosing what battles you have. Because at the same time, I'm so glad Mark said he had the conversation with his children. I don't have any kids, but I know plenty of children, and I talk to them all the time. I'm the crazy lady on the street talking to, I'm the crazy woman on the street who is talking to the young black kids, like, why y'all up here cussing and fussing? Because it's about a caring thing, right? So it's more about, I see what's at stake. The higher I go, or the more things I obtain. I don't think it's about you becoming less radical, it's that you're making decisions that are best suited for you and your family. And that's just the decisions that we make every day.
You got up there, I promised.
Hello, my name is Antonio Hickman. I'm a case manager at Community Action as well as a youth worker at Beginnings Group Home. I work with a population between the two jobs, between the ages of 11 and 41. We are all together. Life matters, period. The next thing I wanted to say is that black men mean mug each other because they're too homophobic to smile at each other. The next thing I wanted to say that yes, they need to rewrite textbooks. I agree with Texas, rewrite it. I could go all day. I'd run the batteries out of this microphone if you let me. But, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to respect everyone else's time. And I just wanted to say this because I've always wanted a stage to say it. If the police say stop, that means stop. If they say freeze, that means don't move. If they say get down, that means get down. You will be shot. You will be killed, and you will not be living anymore. I know it seems like it's just common sense, but clearly it's not. Stop moving, stop reaching, stop acting like you want to be a YouTube sensation and trying to record everything. Just do what you have to do to succeed, not survive.
Are there not gay black men? Okay, so how are black men too homophobic to smile at each other?
The ones that are mean mugging each other are not smiling at each other. And they're afraid to smile at each other because of how the other person would look at them.
But Devin, what you're saying is that two gay black men are still black men who look at each other, who might mean mug each other. That's what you're saying, right?
Do they know that they're gay? Do they know the other man is gay?
I think
he was just generalizing, saying that that's one of the cultural perceptions, is that brothers so apprehensive about their sexuality that they not comfortable just somebody they don't know. I don't think he was saying all black men.
I'm not trying to. I don't want to get into a debate, but I do have all night.
Yeah, let's move on. Let's move on because we are running out of. We are over time. CP time like a mug. So I'm sorry, we have to wrap up. We got to wrap up. We're over time a lot. So as we can see, this is an issue that's pressing. This is an issue that's going to continue. And the next panel we're going to have is going to get even more into this. The next panel is in a month, April 17th. We're talking about policing in post 9/11 America. Basically, what does it mean to be in a police state since the towers went down? We're going to have a couple of panelists coming in. One is Captain French. He works with Captain Magnus out in Richmond, California, who he is one of the police officers that implemented a no violent mechanism of dealing with community action. And in doing that, he decreased crime in the area dramatically in his tenure. So she's going to come and talk about that. We have Norm Jacobs coming in as well from town, the Beloit police chief, and we also have Charlie Tubbs, and we'll have Ron Nikora, who's a professor of political science here on campus. So please come out. It'll be at Eaton Chapel at 7 o'clock on April 17th. I want to thank our panelists. Yes. It's good. It was really good. Very, very good. This is one of the realest discussions we've had on campus in a long time about race and racism. I also want to thank the Black Lives Matter Beloit Committee. We've got Cecil Youngblood, Ron Nikora, Daryl Smith, Felicia Carlson, Bill Conover, and Namunga Mentino. And lastly, we want to thank Daksha Howard. She works with Cecil in Office of Intercultural Affairs, and she's basically our logistics woman who does basically everything behind the scenes. She's not here tonight, but I want to put that out there to thank you. Huh? Yes. And finally, thank y'all for coming out. Actually, this is one of the best conversations we've had around race on this campus in a long time. It's got to keep happening. You cannot keep this out of your mouths. You need to start talking about it, engaging with it, facing it, and dealing with it. Whites and blacks, anywhere in between. It's something that it is not just on individuals to do, it's the whole community going at it. So let's keep this momentum going. Come out in a month's time. We'll talk about the intersections of race in the police. And then from there, we're going to culminate in a final event that will release to the community and the campus pretty soon. So thank you for coming out. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Oh, that was awesome. That was really great.